DS for Crossback review only last year. Europe's second-largest car maker had to be bailed out of tire financial straits by the French government and its Chinese partner, Dongfeng Motors. Matt Saunders, deputy road test editor. The first modern-day DS, the 3, was well received, but other DS cars haven't been tepid. Demand in Europe for new cars was blamed, although the group's equally tepid product lineup could be rightfully identified as doing it no favors. One remedy to the patent lack of elan was the formation of DS automobiles, a large-scale rebranding exercise intended to inject some Parisian-style flair. The exercise kicked off in 2009 with a very well-received DS3 Supermini and continued with the very good-looking albeit slightly less well-received DS5 crossover. In between the two, in 2010, we got the first DS4. Based on the Citroën C4, it provided the DS project with the family-sized hatchback normally required to generate sustainable volume in Europe. Despite its overly conventional platform, Citroën insisted the car wasn't conventional at all and described it as a hybrid of a saloon, a coupe and compact 4x4, in other words, just the kind of avant-garde amalgamation it had conceived the DS badge to deliver in the first place. Unfortunately, the most unorthodox thing about the 4 was the decision to nail the rear windows shut. Otherwise, it was a modestly raised C4 under a modestly prettier body. The imprudence of Citroën's attempt to sell this variant as more sporting than its lower-to-the-ground sibling is reflected in the decision to split its facelift replacement into two entities, the 4 the standard hatch and this, the 4 Crossback, the higher-riding variant for those interested in urban adventure. That niche, you'll hardly need reminding, is spoilt for choice, with a multitude of compact crossovers jostling for attention. We tested the 1.6-liter Blue by 120 to discover the 4 Crossback's proper place among them. The 4, in either guise, remains more concerned with the design bit of the equation than the engineering. DS describes the model two distinct bodies as complementary versions, which is a roundabout way of confirming that there isn't a dramatic amount of difference between what is ostensibly the same shell. The most noticeable change is the introduction of the signature DS front end, carried over from the 5 and a suitable replacement for the 4's previous nose, which was too conspicuous in its retread of the C4's design right down to the Citroën grille. Ridding the 4 of its siblings' double crest and replacing the headlights which at least bring the model more noticeably into the DS fold, but previous accusations of close similarity to the C4 are still hard to shake. Bespoke features, not least the relocating of the rear door handles into the window line, remain. Yet so does the suspicion that the car just isn't special enough to look at. In this respect, the differentiated wheel arch trim, rear spoiler and roof bars do make the Crossback marginally more interesting to behold, even if its 30 mm of extra ride height isn't necessarily apparent on first inspection. Mechanically, the facelift hardly gets any more profound. The exclusively front-driven model remains based on the second generation of the C4, so it's still underpinned by the same outgoing PF2 platform. Citroën's chassis-based tinkering has been limited to the conventional passive suspension, where the springs and dampers have been revised in both variants, although it is the Crossback that has gained the softer settings its predecessor plainly needed. The steering remains a curiosity, using an electro-hydraulic setup rather than the electrically powered system common in Citroën's range. The engine's far more familiar. A single turbocharged petrol unit, the 128 Bishop 1.2-liter 3-cylinder PureTech 130, is available in either the 4 or Crossback, but the more powerful 1.60 HP 4-pot in 163 Bishop and 207 Bishop guises is the preserve of the hatch. Diesel options are split between the entry-level 118 Bishop 1.6 Blue by 120 and the larger 2.0-liter motor, sold as 148 Bishop and 178 Bishop variants. A 6-speed manual gearbox is standard as fitted to our test car, leaving the latest P6 6-speed toward converter auto the options list, unless you first go for one of the most powerful engines. Anyone half hoping for the sort of dramatic transformation enacted on high-spec versions of the 5 will be left disappointed by the thoroughly conventional cabin here. Aside from the badge swap on the steering wheel, the vast majority of the 4's fixtures and fittings are again shared with the C4. On the one hand, that's no bad thing. The C4's interior is perfectly presentable and usable and not found particularly wanting in build quality or finish. But there is precious little cosy-sitting, interesting or inviting about it, either. and if the intention of the DS brand is to better compete against the droves of hatchbacks and small crossovers now built by premium manufacturers, the Ford falls at the first hurdle here. Its second sin, as before, is access to the cabin. On opening, most of us tend to judge how much space to give a car door by where the handle is and how close our leg is to the bodywork. Unfortunately, that discounts the trailing edge styling appendage at the top of each rear door, which subsequently jabs you in the chest or arm like a disgruntled bouncer. You'll learn the lesson quickly enough, but as with learning to live with the fact that the back windows still don't open, it's not the lesson you particularly want to be forced to sit through. Predictably, given the carried-over platform and wheelbase, the Ford doesn't fix its predecessor's main shortcoming, which was a shortage of space. The front is acceptable if you're below 5'11" in tall, held along in the Crossback's case by the moderately elevated driving position, but in the rear, it's no better than most 5-door superminis, offering knee and head clearance only to those of decidedly average proportions. Slide the 6-footer into the equation and the car starts to feel cramped in a hurry. The new 7.0-inch touchscreen is a welcome addition to the Ford, even if the software behind it lacks the verve and usability of rival systems. It is simple enough to operate, with physical shortcut buttons beneath the screen providing easy access to its major functions. These include Sat-nav, rudimentary in appearance yet perfectly serviceable DAC tuner ditto and Bluetooth connectivity, including the hook-up Duo Mobile. In this, Citroën has wisely gone the whole hog by including mirror screen technology, which duplicates an Android or iOS operating system on the display if you connect your smartphone via the USB port. The manufacturer has also made its DS Connect box available. This provides automatic SOS assistance, servicing notifications, a car location service and a tracking system in case of theft. Our performance statistics paint a picture of a fairly sluggish, one-dimensional engine and transmission here, and driving the Ford Crossback only confirms the accuracy of that representation. Although the peak outputs look adequate enough on paper, this car is afflicted by a lack of flexibility of delivery and particularly long gearing, making it slower than it really ought to be both against the stopwatch and out on the road. Our performance statistics paint a picture of a fairly sluggish, one-dimensional engine and transmission here, and driving the Ford Crossback only confirms the accuracy of that representation. Although the peak outputs look adequate enough on paper, this car is afflicted by a lack of flexibility of delivery and particularly long gearing, making it slower than it really ought to be both against the stopwatch and out on the road. Renault's 1.5-liter diesel Cadger was the slowest new car we performance tested all last year, taking more than 14 cc to hit 60 mph from rest. But although the Ford comfortably beat the Renault's mark from standing to 60 mph, it's only 0.1 cc faster, pulling from 30 mph to 70 mph in fourth gear. So long is the 4S gearing, in fact, that it'll only just pull fourth gear below 30 mph and takes so long to muster much turbo boost and meaningful response to the accelerator at that speed and those revs that you'd struggle to keep up with the traffic. It's impossible to be sure at exactly what point in its rev range that 1.6-liter engine wakes up and hunkers down, because the 4S digital rev counter is frustratingly small and dismayingly imprecise. But it certainly does that at some point before 2000 RPM. Only to spirit the car's mass forward quite meekly in anything higher than third gear. Overtaking on single carriageway roads requires plenty of space and determination, because the crankshaft isn't particularly free spinning above 4000 RPM, either. So what, DS automobiles may say, this is the entry-level diesel option in a 6-tier engine range, and customers will want it to be frugal above all else. To a point, we'd agree with the thinking, although other crossover manufacturers manage to deliver economy with much greater drivability. But the Ford isn't desperately frugal, either. It struggles to break through the 50 mpg threshold in normal running, and recorded 49.3 mpg for our true mpg testers, where a like-for-like Nissan Qashqai was a 53 mpg performer, and an Audi Q3 returned 51.5 mpg. The 4S controls are fairly light and usable, although the lack of definition in the shift quality of the 6-speed gearbox is typical of a car that's only ever going to engage its driver somewhat unwillingly. The engine is averagely refined for a small 4-cylinder diesel, and whine noise is a bigger intrusion upon the cabin's calm than anything else at motorway speeds. It's